Well, welcome to our panel. We're really excited that everybody is here. And we're going to be talking about a variety of things. Blended learning is one of them. And blended learning, for those of you that don't really know what blended learning is a mixture of traditional methods with technology. And it's the most effective way to get kids involved in education and most effective way to get them basically hooked. And I have a lot of experience doing this at Palo Alto High School and actually working with a variety of groups around the nation. So I thought what we would do first to start was to have every panelist introduce themselves and to talk a little bit about what you would like to do and tell a little bit about your background. So can we start?
Hi,
Here.
I'm Krishna, Bharat. So I'm not a stranger to technology since I've been at Google for about 15 years and I just left. And I've spent most of my life trying to figure out how to make computers manipulate content and bring it to people. And recently I've become quite interested in education. Being a father of 3 children, I'm trying to understand how technology can transform the space as well.
That's great. Next, thank you, Krishna.
Hi, I'm Shalini, Govil-Pai. I head up partner solutions at YouTube. One of the initiatives that we are driving is, of course, using YouTube as a platform for education in the blended environments, as Esther mentioned. In particular, my team is also looking at more specialized forms of education. So K-12 is obviously always a focus. It's the highest impact that we can have. But then also, how do we think about more niche forms of education? Lifelong education is one of them. Another one is also credit-based education. So as you're thinking about how do I develop newer skills, newer technologies to keep myself abreast of what's going on in my industry and make sure that I'm ahead of the curve. So that's another area that we're really looking at and interested in.
Thank you. Shalini?
Good morning. The other Krishna here. I'm a co-founder and CEO of a company called Tynker. 2
Krishnas and a Shalini.
Tynker is an online platform for kids to learn coding and make things with their imagination. Been an entrepreneur before, built 2 companies. As a parent, observing my own kids, using so much technology, may it be iPads and YouTube and Wikipedia, and their learning has changed, and they're surrounded by technology, and that prompted us, me and my co-founders, think about what could we do for our kids to help them manipulate the technology for their own use to become innovators and change makers. That's how we ended up starting Tynker. And 3 years we've learned a lot what kids like, how they use coding as a tool to make their imagination come true, and it's making us do more. Ultimately, if kids learn, no kid wants to learn coding or anything that parents want them to learn. They want to learn something that they're interested in. So our big problem is how do we take technology to that mindset?
So I'm just building off what Krishna said. No kid wants to learn what their parents tell them to learn. They want to learn basically whatever it is that they came up with. And that is actually the key to empowering them and to making them learn. So what you want to do is give them a certain percentage of time when they can work on something that they're interested in. And that's actually the basis of the blended learning. So the idea is to have the traditional method where you lecture for 50% of the time, and then the other 50%, or if the teacher is reluctant to do 50%, you could do like 40%, 30%, some percentage of time where the student actually is in control. And I think that's one of the biggest problems in education today, and one of the biggest problems with why there's such a big dropout rate, because kids today do not have a lot of control in the classroom. If you just think about your own education, I'm sure you didn't. And if you think education has changed in the classroom, just go look at your local school. The majority of the teachers are still lecturing full time. And the classroom of tomorrow does not have that. It gives students the ability to work independently. And so We can talk just a little bit about like the programming, using, I think it was, let's see, one of the Krishnas, it was you, I think, was talking a little bit about using, you know, textbook as a programmable space. Is that you? Yeah, you might want to talk about that. But if we can make the textbook interactive, so students can actually write something and then share what they write about what they've read, then they're going to be more interested in the textbook. But just having a textbook on a computer is no different than having a textbook on paper, and it's no more engaging. And so the idea is to engage kids and not to act like a policeman in the classroom, which is actually what a lot of teachers are doing, and that's part of the reason why they drop out. So the last speaker said that 1 in 5 teachers drop out after 5 years. The statistics are wrong. 50% of the teachers drop out after 5 years. That's a major problem. In the state of California today, we have a drop of 23% fewer applicants applying to be teachers. So it's a worldwide problem. So anyway, we'll just talk about a little bit of your idea with this textbook.
Thank you, Esther. I think in the world of tomorrow, it's widely acknowledged that we're going to have kids who know how to program. Besides reading, writing, arithmetic, programming is going to be a fundamental skill. And is the goal of teaching them programming to let them go off and develop their own iPad apps? Is that the goal? No, I think it's something quite different. I think programming is a fundamental faculty to allow you to learn on your own and be a maker. So imagine if computers were invented before textbooks, how would we teach? Right? So the equivalent of textbook would be a makerspace for that particular topic, where kids could dive in, and whether it's outer space or inner space or gravity or sound or whatever, what have you that you're investigating, you can actually work inside the simulated world. And we have plenty of real examples of simulated worlds. All our games are simulated worlds. Minecraft is an example of a simulated world.
It's a great example.
You can get in there, you can program the kinds of things that you're supposed to learn that is hard to do in the real world. In the real world, project-based learning is a great opportunity, but it's hard to do. Kids build chemical volcanoes because that's what they're capable of. Instead, they should be investigating radioactivity or lasers or whatever. So all of that is much easier to do in the virtual world. Just as game programmers have discovered, they can create fantasy spaces. They can actually create spaces where you can jump in and have a learning experience. So I think there is a huge business opportunity as well. And once educators show the way, I think the software community is fully capable of exploiting this and making money.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea to have these, input, like you say, textbooks that have some kind of like interactivity. So with Shalini and YouTube, this is kind of near and dear to my heart. Yes, very near and dear. So YouTube is the #1 most popular website out there. There's 100 hours of video uploaded to YouTube every minute while you're sitting here. Just imagine. That's the #1 thing that kids in schools want to watch. As a matter of fact, I don't ban anything in my class, but I do tell them not to watch YouTube. Because what happens is if I see them watching a YouTube video and I come over and say, stop watching that, I get hooked by watching all those cats. And so then I's like, well, wait just a minute. Well, let's turn it off after this next video. So it's hard for me to control, right? So anyway, but YouTube is a fantastic platform for education. And so you might want to talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, and actually I'm going to talk threefold. One is, of course, it's a fantastic platform for our kids. There are understandably some issues because it's a platform, it aggregates all kinds of content, and therefore there are some safety concerns that we are looking into as to how do we filter so that the content that's surfaced is really appropriate for the age groups that are watching it. So that's one aspect. And Krishna talked a lot about it, and I think the other Krishna is also going to talk a lot about the K-12 part of things, so I'm not going to dwell that much into it. The other aspect that I'm a big believer in, and I'm seeing a lot of initiatives drive up, is how do you also take education from a point of view of learning throughout your life and make it more vocational. So for example, you think of the baby boomers, they're all aging, but I don't think any of them are really ready to retire per se. How do we help them find more usefulness by up-leveling their learning in technology or newer age education that they were not into as of now? How do we ensure that they can remain, quote unquote, productive in society and in the workplace, where they're not necessarily classrooms for them to go to and up-level their educations? I think that's a really big area that people have started to look into, but I don't think there's enough momentum there. One of the initiatives that we drove at YouTube for our particular base was a creator academy where people could come and learn about how do I create really compelling videos. And it doesn't have to be necessarily that they're really young kids, that they could be any age, but they're really learning about how to make videos, how to get more audiences on them, how do they use the YouTube platform and other online platforms to really create compelling videos, whether it's for the purposes of education or otherwise. And we're seeing fantastic momentum on that. The blended learning classroom that Esther was talking about is another initiative that we drove through the Creator Academy, where we had them learning on the platform and then using what we call our YouTube spaces, which are actually live spaces that we have where people can actually come in and create productions. We have them come in there for classroom-style learning. And like I said, these are not K-12 students. They are people who are out there in the workforce, and they're doing this because they want to keep abreast of their industry. So it's been really, really fantastic. We've actually opened up spaces now in more than 5 countries, and our Creator Academy has been visited by over 10 million users. So it's really fast and growing opportunity for us. So that's one. The other aspect on the flip side is the creation aspect, as I was talking about. I think as you open up the democratize actually how to create content for education and for other purposes, we're actually seeing some fantastic uses of just how do I tie my shoelace? Like, would you ever teach that in a classroom? Probably not. But there are like videos out there that people are just crowdsourcing and putting up. And I think there's fantastic opportunities for how do you lower the bar to actually create those kind of videos really simply and easily and make them engaging and make them really useful for everyone to create content around.
So on the shoelace thing, you know what? Most kids don't know how to tie their shoelaces anymore. It's really sad. And it's because they have those shoes that just like have Velcro on it, and they just close them up, or they just slip them on. And so this is actually it's a good use of video for kids, how to tie your shoelaces. But it's also, you might want to think about like all these videos that could be made. It could be like a whole group of videos that could be placed on YouTube for a variety of skills that kids need to have and that they're not getting today for some reason or other. And also for lifelong learning, as you were talking about, there's a lot of opportunity for making that. So, and then you have that new creator space. We need to promote that because that's actually a fantastic opportunity. It helps entrepreneurs, helps anybody that wants to make videos. And as you know, there's nothing more powerful than seeing something than just hearing about it. So that would be great. So now we have K-12 we're going to talk about.
So I have one question to ask the audience. How many of you think that kids should learn coding when they're as young as 6 years old? So so we all agree that that's a skill that our kids should learn. The problem is that how do you make it fun for them? So we looked at that problem and say, should we give them a tool that they learn on their own? And how do they learn? How is it fun for them? Why should they learn coding? First question is, why am I learning this?
What is that?
Why are you asking me to learn coding? So we said, okay, it took us 2 years to figure out, like, it's not about just the tools that you give the kids, but the learning experiences. What are the learning experiences you give them that they're engaged and they want to do it, versus we asking them to teach it. That's the first problem we looked at when we went to a lot of classrooms, put lots of tools in front of them, and saw mixed results of some kids picking up, some kids not able to, this is not a great tool. So the learning experience are key for kids. And today, the iPad games and Android tablet games that are teaching math have those learning experience. They're gamifying learning. They're engaging the kids, teaching math, fractions, different things. So the second question we tackled was when you go into classroom, you know, sage on the stage, what the teacher used to be, that all-knowing everything that impacting the kids, to how do they become mentors? I mean, in an economy where technology is driving, they're not really technology savvy as much as the kids are. So how do you enable teachers to play the mentorship role while the kids are learning coding? That's the second problem we looked at. So we went to classrooms when we started this project, 6 months every day. Different classrooms, we put these tools in front of the kids. I remember first day, 6 of us back in the car, all the comments we heard from kids is, this is like, you know, excuse my language, this sucks. You know, so from there, took us 6 months to get them to start using it. And end of the 6th month, the aha moment for us, a 4th grader built this solar system simulation using 30 lines of code. And I was thinking, if I were to write this, I have all this complexity in my head about, you know, circular motion, you know, gravity, angular velocities, and how to position things. It could probably like 1,000 lines of code. But their minds are much more imaginative, non-constrained. And if you give them the right set of tools and get out of their way, they'll learn a lot, and they'll give you feedback to improve those tools. For teachers, what we've done is they're inundated with this stuff about Common Core, yet another thing I need to teach. And the biggest question that for us was, how does coding fit in my curriculum? I'm a science, I teach art. How does this fit? So it took us a while to kind of solve that problem. So we've kept asking the questions. Finally, they want to do project-based teaching, project-based learning, project-based teaching. So introducing computing in that context of enabling kids to learn through projects, as Krishna was referring to, interactive books where they have their own ideas, manipulating things, and showcasing their understanding of concepts. And the third biggest thing is, how do you make this coding as a life skill versus another subject they need to learn? I mean, if you make it like math where you will be graded, you know, you got to get A, B, and C.
That's bad.
It's just going to get, so that's another thing we're tackling. That is all comes back to interest driven. So if we ask a lot of kids, what would you like to do? They say, I want to hack Minecraft. That's the first thing a kid says in the middle school, I want to write a mod. So you have to take programming to that, and that's some of those challenges that we're working on in the K-12 space.
So I just wanted to comment on one of the things that Krishna said, and that is, you know, what do you do with the teacher? You know, the teacher doesn't know as much as a student. Students actually know more in the whole digital space. So this is what I did. I actually admitted to my class I did not know what I was doing. And that worked beautifully, as a matter of fact. They thought it was a wonderful opportunity to help me, and it empowered them. And that's how I started, actually, in 1987. So it's been going on for a long time, when I got all these Macintosh computers in my classroom, and I didn't know how to turn them on. And so today, my students still do the same thing. Actually, they ended up being kind of like the IT department for the school, because they knew so much. And the more that they interacted with whatever I was doing, the more they learned. And so, of course, today I've caught up a little bit, but they're still ahead. But I think it's hard for teachers to admit to students that they don't know something. That's the #1 problem. But if we could change the culture and say it's okay for a teacher to let the students have some power and authority. First, it does wonders for the student. Can you imagine how great that is, to be able to say that, you know, you helped the teacher? But we need to say that that's okay, and it needs to be part of the culture of the classroom, and that's part of this whole blended learning thing. And so how do the kids learn? From each other. Did you know educational studies have said that 80% of the learning takes place out of the classroom? So why not just bring the outside of the classroom into the classroom, giving them those opportunities? So we have some questions here. I think I'll let the panelists answer some of them. let's see, it says in redefining education over the past years, have they, I guess it's basically, has it reduced dropouts? How are these dropouts certified as per their interests? So do you guys know how it's impacted the dropout rate? Has technology impacted the dropout rate? Anybody know?
I think it's a symptom of an opportunity not being pursued. I think when people drop out, it's because the education doesn't seem to make sense to some degree with the world they're getting into. And a little bit of what you were alluding to just now about the changing role of the classroom. If the dynamics are closer to the real world, where people are actually doing things that make sense in the real world, in teams where the teacher is not a sage, but is a coordinator, I think the closer we bring it to practice, the more allure there will be in the classroom for kids to stay. I think there are many reasons why they drop out, some of them because the system just spits them out. In other cases, because they're not motivated. When it comes to the motivation issue, I think changing the classroom into a place which has high energy will actually help solve this problem, but right now maybe it's not.
And if I may add, I don't know the dropout rates in schools.
I'll tell you what they are, and then you can all be shocked.
Okay.
It's 40% of American high schools. It's cut down a little bit more, so now I think it's down to 35%, a little bit. But if we just look across the bay in Oakland, it's 70%. So this is just a huge problem. And I think it relates to something what you were saying earlier, what Krishna was saying too, about if they're engaged, and if it's meaningful, and if it's real, if they're doing something that matters to them, they probably won't drop out. So
yeah, I was just going to comment on the dropout rates are well known on the MOOCs and the online courses like Coursera. They're actually much higher even than what you mentioned.
I know.
And the reasons, as they're digging in, is primarily what Esther was just talking about, is 80% of the learning is actually outside the classroom, where it's face-to-face interactions with your peers. And an online-only course doesn't offer that. And you try to do it through all, the Hangouts and video conferencing, et cetera, but it's just not the same. And that's why the blended style is so important, and all of these online education technologies are actually exploring that. It's not just about learning online in your self-paced environment, but there's also ways for you to actually socially interact and meet people face-to-face, because that's really where a large part of the learning happens.
Krishna, do you have anything to add? This question.
I think just go to the next question.
Okay, next question. So many questions. Whichever one. I'm currently a student at UCSC, and I see that the online classes with no person in the lecture, have a higher failure rate. They do. Yep. Do you have any comments about that? Well, I personally, it's like there's classes at UCSC. It's based on something you said about Coursera, and it's based on all these online classes. There's a lot of online classes, and what happened is a lot of people thought, oh, kids can learn. You just put a computer in front of them, put some headphones on them, let them sit there for 4 hours, and my God, they learned it all. This is just a joke. Doesn't happen, doesn't work. They need human interaction. You can let kids do that for 15 minutes, and then after that, they have to come together as a group and talk about what they just learned, because otherwise it doesn't work. That's why Coursera has a dropout rate of 95%. So so one thing that could happen, there'd be some way that some entrepreneur could create a place where people can get together after they've been involved in some kind of a digital learning space and talk about what they did and what they learned. Because that's what's missing, the human interaction. You're never going to get rid of teachers. They're all worried about, you're going to replace them. It's a joke. They're not going anywhere. It's just their role is changing from the front of the classroom to the side. That's it. And in my own classes, I have 80 kids in one class. So how do I manage that? Well, I was just thinking about it this morning. You know, I'm sort of like the conductor in an orchestra. You know, I'm sitting there providing the space, waving my hands around, and they're playing the instruments. And that's how they learn. And so you need to provide a space where the kids are actually going to be doing the learning, because learning is not passive. Learning is active. Learning is actually doing. But, you know, the culture today still is, it's based on this 1892 Committee of 10. You probably never heard of them, but they're, yeah, involves, you know, all the heads of these major universities who basically said subjects have to be divided into certain time periods and lectures have to be done in a certain way. And we're still doing that, you know, and they're still in charge. By the way, in case you wondered, the SAT is still controlling the country and the world, by the way. So you want?
Yeah, so it seems like we still have 19th century pedagogy with, you know, 21st century technology. And, you know, MOOCs are wonderful in the sense that they connect a lot of people together. But it still cannot be sort of the teacher is a sage and everybody is a disciple. Unless you get them working as teams, building something, I don't think their mind really opens up. And so I think maybe that is the missing component. Maybe it's not just lectures as usual. You really should be thinking about this as, in the real world, employees in a company come together with different roles to pull something together. And this kind of needs to reflect that in the classroom. Of course, the goal here is not to produce something for commerce, but it is to produce something that you can learn from. So if more of that comes in, I think these MOOCs will have a higher retention rate. Because once you come in, you get enlisted.
Yeah, can I just add to that? So one of the learnings that we had from our Creator Academy was really the fact that we brought people into this environment, which was our YouTube spaces, where they could actually interact and learn from each other was really huge. And I think that one potential opportunity for a lot of the entrepreneurs out here is also to think about, you know, how could you use, for example, the local libraries or the local, you know, a lot of these, like, I'll say post offices, but a lot of these local areas are actually not being used to their fullest extent because digital has just taken over. And libraries are a great example where everyone's just like downloading books on their Kindles and they're no longer visiting libraries. How could you use some of these to inspire these like group settings where education or reading can actually take place in a much more collaborative environment? I think there's a lot of opportunity there that I haven't seen a lot of momentum around.
So here's a question, interesting. Is video-based learning creating a generation of students that can't learn with books? Krishna, you want to answer that? Do you think that's true?
I mean, I think, you know, if you look at some of the successful, you know, if you look at Khan Academy where the content is 10 minutes segments, where the attention span of the students are much easier to grasp and they're sliced down so that you're learning one concept at a time, is video. Like, and my kids like learn a ton from YouTube, so they're like learning how to build next Lego thing or some other thing. So that's short span videos are awesome, they're great. The MOOCs, I think, going back to is that they took the traditional classroom, they kind of made it into video and slides, they put it on online and said, that's the MOOC. The process hasn't changed. I don't know the answer whether they're reading or writing. One thing I know we observe is kids tend not to read much. They just want to experiment with things as we put things in front of them.
Yeah. So, you know, I just got the word that we're out of time, unfortunately. I'd love to continue. We have so many more questions, but I think there's somebody else that's going to be coming in here and wanting to speak. So thank you all for joining us. And